Hello, seniors. This is the dating questions video. You've sent me, a bunch of you have sent me really good questions, and I'm going to try to answer them. I've already been answering questions, of course, today, so I guess this is question and answer day for me. But I was really impressed with the questions that I received. Actually, I got some questions a couple years ago. I did this a couple years ago. Actually, golly, this says 2016. So 4 years ago. Was this with your class? I don't know. But one of the questions was, do girls really have cooties? Do guys have cooties? What are cooties? Actually, 3 of the questions. So your questions were much more serious and real. So yeah. And I was also asked, do you think it's wrong to not want to get married? That's actually a pretty good question. No, it's not wrong to not want to get married. But I'm gonna address your questions. I brought those to school with me today, just in case I didn't get a lot of questions. But I got a lot of questions, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on this. I have 20 questions. I may do this in 2 half-hour videos. I'm not supposed to give you more than a half hour a day. I think in Senior Bible it probably won't be a half an hour a day, but so you can watch them all in one day, but I may do 2 half-hour videos. We'll see how long this takes. Maybe it won't even take a half an hour. So I'm just going to go through in order. That's easier for me to make sure I got them all done. So how do you know definitely without question that you have found the right person to marry? Well, I don't know that there'll ever be like 0 question, 0 doubt in your mind, but I think you can be fairly certain. Here's the first thing I would do. I would decide ahead of time. I would decide before you really begin dating someone, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are the things that a person has to have or has to be in order for you to be willing to date them? Because if a person doesn't have those, that's not a good marriage choice, right? A main non-negotiable, I think, for anyone who's a follower of Christ is that that person needs to be a follower of Christ. We're not to be unequally yoked, in Paul's words. That's a term that was used for oxen, and if the oxen were not yoked together correctly, one might stray off, and the other one is going to have to go that exact same direction. In other words, I'm sorry, I just got a little something in my throat. Yeah, so if you're going to yoke yourself up with someone who's not a believer, they're going to go off in this direction, and you're going to of necessity go that way too, or you're going to have to break the yoke and go a different direction. So that's a definite non-negotiable. Now, other non-negotiables are going to be different for you. I learned from my relationship my freshman and sophomore year in college that I couldn't marry a flirt. And I married the farthest thing from a flirt. And that's a beautiful thing for me. Some women might find that attractive. I don't. So that was important to me. I needed someone who was calm. I needed someone who was gentle. I knew, I seem pretty brash and bold and brave, but I hate confrontation. And so if I would have married someone who's very confrontational, I would have spent a lot of my life crying. So it was really important to me that I find someone gentle and someone kind. And I did. It was important to me to marry someone who could, however, carry on deep conversations, who wanted to talk about things that matter. One of the most beautiful things about Jeff is that he was raised in a family that didn't talk about things that mattered. They talked about things like the weather or how long the sermon was, but not deep things, not important things, right? Jeff loves to talk about important things. In fact, I just mentioned, I think to another class the other day in another video, that Jeff asked the question of each of us. It was Jeff and Katie and Lane and me sitting around. He said, what is it? If you would name one thing, what's the one thing that you would say it just roots you in your faith? Like, you know that the gospel is true because of this. And we all answered that question. And Jeff and I talk about deep things all the time. That's important to me, that we not just talk about cursory things, but we talk about things that matter. So I would make a list of those. And as you decide even who to date, some of those things you can't know at first. But like the flirting thing, if you see a guy or a gal that's flirting with a bunch of people and they start flirting with you and ask you out, he's like, no. And don't feel so desperate to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you'll go out with someone that you know has things that are not part of your non-negotiables. So don't be so desperate for a boyfriend that you go, well, yeah, he doesn't really know Jesus, but I could help him with that. No, that's a non-negotiable. So while I don't think that you can know definitely, like 100% sure, if that person lines up well, matches well with what you're looking for in a person, then that's a good thing. I think I needed someone who was an introvert. I think being married to another extrovert, we would have just clashed with each other, right? I have a lot of extroverts that are friends of mine, and I love having extroverted friends, but I think I needed someone that was a little bit, less extroverted, more introverted, which Jeff actually is. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have challenges in your relationship. Just because you have a challenge in your relationship doesn't mean you just, pick up anchor and sail away. But if you have someone who matches up, then that's a good person. And I found that in Jeff. One of the first things that happened with Jeff that made me realize I could really like this guy was we were at church and there was a family that was visiting that had been gone for 5 or 10 years, for a long time. And Jeff went up to them and engaged them in conversation and asked about their family members, asked about their children by name, and he hadn't seen them in years. But what's Dave doing now? And he wasn't talking about himself. He was concerned about those other people. He wanted to hear from them. That was very attractive to me. That he didn't want to monopolize the conversation. He wanted to listen, and indeed Jeff is a great listener. So as you see those things in a person, that's the kind of person to date, and the more they line up with that, that's the kind of person to marry. When Jeff had our first real discussion about the future, about was this going to be a permanent thing, were we going to get married? One of the things, the night that we both knew that we were going to get married, he hadn't proposed yet, and it wasn't official until a couple months later when he did propose. But it was that night that we knew it. And here's what he said to me. He said, I didn't even know what I was looking for until I met you. And now I see that you're exactly who I was looking for all along. Which is really sweet. And the girls right now are going, oh, and it is, it's sweet. But I think it's even better to kind of have an idea of what you're looking for. Have a list of things that you're looking for. And maybe some things that are, no, I can't marry someone like this. I can't marry someone, if you're really frugal and you're good with money and you don't spend on things that you shouldn't spend on, then you start dating someone who's just, doesn't have the money to throw around but throws it around. That's going to be a huge issue if you get married. So be smart about those things, and be smart about those things. Best of all, be smart about those things before you ever start dating. And then secondly, be smart about those things while you're dating. Be smart about those things before you get to a point where it takes a legal document and a bunch of heartache to separate the relationship. So how long, this is the second question, that's the first question, great question. How long should you date the person you're interested in to fully get to know him or her? Well, here's the thing. First of all, you get to know someone best if you spend time with them not doing things physical. If you spend time in groups. That's what made me interested in Jeff, really. I mean, I was interested in him from the first time I saw him because he was cute. But what made me get to know him was this young adults group where we were doing things in groups and talking, and he was talking, really mostly talking as a group, not even interacting as a group, not he and I interacting one-on-one. So uh, you know, the best thing to do is to get to know them as well as you can before you start dating, and not just date, oh, that's a cute girl, I'll ask her out, that's a cute guy, I'll say yes. Get to know that person. Now, I will tell you that Jeff and I got married 364 days after our first date. That's less than a year. Our first date was August 11th of 1985. We were engaged on May 23rd, 1986, and we got married on August 10th, 1986. But we were older. We were 25, and Jeff was just a couple weeks shy of his 29th birthday when we got married. So we were a little bit older. I think if you take the time and you're intentional about getting to know the person, getting to know what they believe, what they value, getting to know their family, we'll talk about family more in a little while, all of those things, then you can get to know someone really well in a year or 2 years for sure. But it also depends on how old you are. Are you ready to get married? And how smart is it for you to get into a really serious relationship at 18 when you want to wait until you graduate from college to get married? That's 4 years away. So spend your time getting to know them, and then you'll get to know them more quickly than if you're spending your time doing things that you want to do but that don't help you get to know that person. I think you know what I mean. Question 3. You won't always be happy in life. If you used to be happy and now struggle sometimes or develop something like depression, do you stay in a relationship? Life happens though, so I feel like you should. Okay, so we're not talking about marriage here. Marriage is for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, and for richer, for poorer, all of those things, till death. So if I develop something like depression, and we have gone through physical things. Jeff battles horrific headaches, and I have, battled debilitating pain in my knees and other, issues that are physical health issues. And so in marriage, it's till death. But in a relationship, I wouldn't fault someone for, in a dating relationship, for saying, I don't have what it takes, I'm not equipped to help this person get through what they're going through. And you can say, I'll try to help you, I'll try to support you, but I can't be in a relationship with you in this condition. I don't think you should, life does happen, but just that, I don't think that that's a good reason to stay with a dating relationship with someone that you're not compatible with. So I would help that person in whatever way I can, and maybe stay, but I'd have to see that person was working toward health and wholeness, I think. Now, again, in a dating relationship. Because if you're going to continue on and say, well, life happens, so I'm just going to stay with this, I'm going to stay with this, and that person is doing nothing to try and get help and you end up marrying, now you're married to this, and it's your daily life, it's your daily reality. And so I'd be cautious about that, not abandoning the person necessarily, but not continuing to date the person necessarily either. Why do some people think once you're married, you can be angry and mean at home or stop treating their spouse the same way? Well, we're sinful. That's the why part of it. But the person probably showed you that there was this possibility of an anger problem before you married, at least if you've spent any time with them. Again, we're going to talk about reaction in a little bit, but when that person was under pressure, how did they react? And you probably saw that reaction a little bit, or maybe the person was, drank to the point of getting drunk and became angry when they were drunk. That is more than a red flag. That is a goodbye in a dating relationship, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, and then some people just feel like, okay, the ink is dried and I can, treat this person however I want. Again, there were hints of that. There were hints of that person's lack of character in the dating relationship, which is why I think Mark Unger says everything's fair game. Be really, really astute and watchful about a person while you're dating them, because this is the time when you can make a decision. Is this right for me or is it not? And if you make that decision too late, then you're stuck with that, other than getting a divorce or breaking off an engagement, both of which are terribly difficult on the person. So yeah, and some people are just not kind. Marry someone kind. Kindness is a good thing. Some people are more logical, some more emotional. Really? Just as part of their personality. He thinks being an emotional person makes you less successful. I'm pretty emotional. I think I'm pretty successful. God is a God of diversity. God loves diversity. You can't look at the world, whether that's human beings and shades of color and nationalities and personalities, or whether it's animals, the aardvark, for heaven's sake. God has to have a sense of humor and the diversity of our world, to know that God is a God of diversity. He loves diversity. He says every tribe, tongue, people, and language will worship before his throne, and that's the way he wants it. So people are different. My dad was a very measured man. He was a very even keel man. He was a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Practical man. And he was a 3-star general and then a vice president of ConAgra. He was extraordinarily successful. But I can name for you 2 people who were just as successful, that were more outgoing, who were more emotional, who were more feelings oriented. I've already named myself. I'm not as successful in the world's eyes, at least, as my father was. But Mr. Hood is very successful, and he's a more emotional guy, and he's very successful. So I don't think it has to do with success. I think what it has to do with is a couple of things. One is, how do you relate together in a relationship with this person? And if someone who's more emotional is difficult for you to handle, and especially if those emotionals are sinful, like emotional, like gets angry and is unkind and is abusive, verbally or physically or whatever it is, then that to me, those things are deal breakers. So if that's what you mean by emotional, but if you just mean that the person cries when they're talking about something emotional, that's okay. You may want that in a person, right? You may want someone whose heart is tender and feels that emotional. So if you mean negative emotion, like lashing out, that's one thing. If you just mean, I get excited about things, or that's me, I get excited about stuff, I get emotional about stuff. I don't think that's necessarily a drawback. It may make someone say, I'm not sure I want to be married to someone that emotional. But it isn't, I don't think it has anything to do with success. All different kinds of personalities are successful. And oftentimes it's those emotional people who have good success with other people. Sometimes those logical people have better success with things like engineering and science, and those emotional people make really good social workers or teachers or other things. And so I don't think that it's a matter of this is more successful than this. It's just their differences. And again, you need to decide what kind of person is a good fit for you. Okay, so Mark Unger talked about keep doing crazy. Like, don't keep doing crazy. If the person's crazy, if the family's crazy, don't keep, or if your relationship is crazy, if the way you relate to one another is unkind. There's a couple that lives across the street from us, and I have several times heard them having shouting matches late at night out in front of their house before the guy gets in his car and storms away, you know, peeling out on his way. That's crazy. A relationship should not, particularly a marital relationship, but any relationship shouldn't be like that. So here's the question. Why doesn't grace give you a license to keep doing crazy? Because crazy isn't healthy. You can have, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. You can have grace and choose to remove yourself from that situation, particularly if it's a dating situation, to remove yourself from that situation. You can forgive whatever. You can forgive anything. That doesn't mean that you have to stay in that relationship if it's crazy. If you see crazy before you're engaged, that's the time to say, look, I care about you, but you need to get help in how you deal with your emotions, or how you treat people, or something like that. And I can't be treated this way. Value yourself enough to not allow yourself to be mistreated, allow yourself to be verbally abused or harangued by someone. And that's the time to do that. That doesn't mean you don't forgive them. That doesn't mean you don't have grace. It means that you know to make that a permanent relationship without that person getting the help he or she needs would be a huge mistake. So if that person can't learn to stop the crazy, then there's going to be heartache in that relationship. So you don't necessarily, the grace isn't necessarily apart from that situation. You can have grace. Why do you need to look at how someone reacts to something? So Mark Gungor really talked about this a lot, that it isn't how someone acts that counts, because you can act, you can pretend, you can play a role as being this great upstanding person with no flaws and no failures. That's why I tell you all the time, if you think that I've got it all together, go ask my kids. My kids will tell you the truth about how I am and who I am. So people can act a certain way, but reactions tend to be like immediate, and they tend to be the real person. Like when you're caught off guard and something happens. This has nothing to do with anything, but this is a stupid reaction that I often have. You can ask my kids if this is true. That I'll be driving, and it's like someone will be coming into my lane, or someone will be doing something that's dangerous, and I'm talking to them and saying, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, stay. That is not how I should react. That's a bad reaction. I should be hitting my horn to let him know. He can't hear me say, stay in your lane, but he can hear my horn and go, oops, sorry, I need to get over. That's but that's my reaction. That's my natural reaction. Now, that's funny, I hope. I'm trying to get better at that. Last time something happened, I honked my horn and I asked Katie, are you proud of me? And she was. But a reaction, that's the real person. And that's the person you're going to marry, because you cannot act. I've been married for 33 and a half years. You can't act that long. You have to react at some point. The real person will come out. You can act for a good long while. And if you marry someone based solely on their actions, you may find out that their reactions are very different after it's too late to walk away easily. So that's why you need to look at their reactions, because that's the real them. I don't remember who asked this, but if you were with us in 11th grade Bible, we talked about this just in general terms, that the people who say there's no such thing as absolute truth, when they are wronged, they tell you that's wrong. Like when you cut them off in traffic, or when you lie to them, they get angry. Their reaction is to get angry. Well, if there's no such thing as absolute truth, why would you get angry when I lie to you? I was doing what was best for me. I was doing what was right for me. but their reactions belie that. Their reactions show what they truly believe. The reactions of the person you're dating shows you who they truly are. And if those contradict your non-negotiables, if those contradict the kind of person you want to marry, you're going to be marrying those reactions. So better to break the marriage off or break the relationship off before you get to the altar. Why should you not always be open with your feelings? I think you do need to be open with your feelings sometimes. I don't think you should never be open with your feelings. But I think there's some feelings, some things that you should just let go. They don't have to know everything. Now, if you stuff your feelings, so if you never talk about your feelings, then it's going to come out, and it's going to, instead of coming out like, you know, sweetie, you hurt me when you said that to me. That was a hurtful thing to say. But then you stuff that, and then something else happens, and you know, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it, and so you stuff that, and eventually it's going to get stuffed so far, so much stuff, that it's going to come out like blah onto the person, and that's bad. But you don't have to communicate every single little feeling you have. The important ones need to be brought up and discussed, and especially misunderstandings. A lot of times we get hurt feelings based on a misunderstanding, and once you understand, then you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have felt that way, and you know, and forgiveness can happen. But what happens is that people don't seek to share their feelings to be understood. They use their feelings as a weapon against the other person, and that's unhealthy. To say, and here are two words to avoid: always and never. Well, you always do that. Well, you never do this for me. Those are almost never true. Almost never true. And so I think it has more to do with how and when we share our feelings than not sharing feelings. I don't think Mark Gungor would say never share your feelings. But there's certain things that can be really hurtful if we share them, and if we share them in the wrong way. So if you're going to share your feelings, share it seeking to understand your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, one E, two E's, not with using it as a weapon against someone else. That's when it becomes hurtful and unhealthy. Okay, we'll answer one more, and then I'll stop and make a second video that should be about the same length. Why should you not live by your feelings? Oh, I meant to did I bring my Bible up with me? I didn't bring my Bible up with me. Our feelings are so fickle. They are so changeable. Last night, I'm having issues with my phone, and am probably going to need a new phone, and worried about the cost of that. I had a phone. I thought I could just switch over to that phone, a phone that was given to me. I couldn't because it was older than my phone. And last night, I was just like crazy, emotional, anxious, and ready to cry, and trying to figure out what to do. And then I remembered I was coming here this morning. Mr. Benson would be here. Mr. Benson can help me. The only reason I am filming this right now with my phone is because of Mr. Benson. And as soon as the thought of Mr. Benson came into my mind, I thought, he can help me. And I was fine. Feelings are so changeable. Feelings are so fickle. If you're going to make decisions, if you're not, you want to live on bedrock. You want to live on something that's sturdy. The wise man built his house on the rock. And the rock is the Word of God. The rock is Jesus. Our feelings deceive us. It's in Jeremiah, but it says this: the heart of man is desperately evil and wicked above all things. Who can know it? Our hearts deceive us. Our hearts are changeable. We need to build our lives on truth. Truth is unchanging. So if we're going to live by our feelings, this is going to be our life all the time. And that is not a fun way to live. If we're going to live anywhere close to this, we need to build our lives on something more than just how we feel. Feelings are real. Feelings are honest, but they're not always, or are honestly felt, but they're not always true. You can feel things based on a bunch of wrong presuppositions. They're not always true, and they're not always helpful. They can be very hurtful, in fact. So yeah, basing a life on feelings is just going to be a constant roller coaster of a ride, and with no stability, and it makes life difficult and unhappy. It is not a good way to live. Yes, of course, feelings are part of life, but if we're going to trust our feelings and live by our feelings as a general rule, it won't go well for you. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to get a drink of water. I'm going to grab my Bible in case I need it again. Then I'm going to give you another video.